Mr. President, I rise today to discuss legislation I introduced to eliminate the Electoral College and ensure that the candidate who wins the most votes will be elected president. Now, clearly, this has nothing to do with this past election. There are recounts going on. We'll see where that goes. But the bottom line is this looks to the future. And I want to say something. The presidency is the only office in America where the candidate who wins the most votes can still lose the election. There isn't any elected office in the nation, be it county level, city level, state level, national level, where this is true. Person gets more votes. It's one person, one vote. Majority wins. Not true in the presidential. You know, I realized how little sense this made many years ago. But when I tried to explain it to my grandkids after this election, they said, "Grandma, who won?" Well, I told them, Donald Trump. Well, wait a minute. Didn't Mrs. Clinton get more votes? Yes. You know, what if we did that in sport? I'm a big basketball fan, major basketball fan. What if the team that got the most votes, the most points, didn't win? What if that happened? What would people think? Well, why not? Well, because not everybody on the team touched the ball. So therefore, even though they won by 40 points, they don't win. This doesn't make sense. This is an outdated system that does not reflect democracy, and it violates the principle of one person, one vote. Every single American, regardless of what state they live in, should be guaranteed that their individual vote matters. Now, throughout our great history, and we've had, now this is the 45th presidential president, we've had 5 elections where the winner of the general election did not win the popular vote. But in our lifetime, it has happened twice, 2 in the last 16 years. And so it really needs to be addressed. This is more than an anomaly now. It looks like it could happen one way or the other. We don't know if a Republican gets seated or a Democrat gets seated. Right now, Hillary Clinton's lead in the popular vote is 2.3 million votes. It is expected that she'll win probably by more than 2.7 million votes. Now, that would be more than the votes cast in Alaska, Delaware, Washington, D.C., Hawaii, Vermont, and Dakotas combined. We're not talking about a few votes. We're talking about 2.7 million votes. More votes cast, more than the votes cast in Alaska, Delaware, Washington, D.C., Hawaii, Vermont, and the Dakotas combined. And Clinton will have won the popular vote by a wider margin than not only Al Gore in 2000, but also Richard Nixon in '68 and John Kennedy in '60. Now, Donald Trump himself said in 2012, and I quote exactly, "The Electoral College is a disaster for a democracy," unquote. I couldn't agree more. And I don't agree with too much of what Donald Trump says. But I sure agree with that. He said the Electoral College is a disaster for a democracy. Then right after the election, he said his views did not change. He still says, you know, I'm not going to change my mind just because I won. I'd rather see it where you went with simple votes. These are all quotes of his. You know, you get 100 million votes and somebody else gets 90 million votes and you win. Now, after he said that, I think his advisors went a little nuts, because the next morning he tweeted, the Electoral College system was, quote, actually genius. But then he also tweeted this, which is very interesting. Quote, if the election were based on the total popular vote, I would have campaigned in New York, Florida, California, and won even bigger and more easily. Okay, maybe it's true. Maybe it's true. His point is well taken. Presidents Presidential candidates should campaign in every single state. Actually, if you got rid of the Electoral College, candidates would campaign in every state because the vote of every American matters regardless of where they live. Because if you get all the popular vote in one state, you will add to your popular vote at the end. Now, according to, quote, nationalpopularvote.com, 94% of campaigning by the presidential candidates in 2016 took place in 12 states. 12 states, that was it. And 2/3 of these general election campaign events took place in 6 states, just 6 states. Now, Scott Walker of Wisconsin said in 2015, quote, "The nation as a whole is not going to elect the next president. 12 states are. 12 states are." Just think about that. The nation as a whole is not going to elect the next president. He was right when he said that in 2015. He was right. So what message does this send to the people who live in the populous states like my state? 39 million Americans live there. What does it send as a message to the 27 million Americans who live in Texas? What message does it send to the smaller states like North Dakota, Rhode Island, where the candidates don't even bother to campaign for the votes because they're either blue or red? They're not purple, so they don't matter. No wonder voter turnout was just 58% in this election. Too many Americans don't believe their vote matters because they're told, oh, you live in a red state, it's going for Trump. Even if you're for Trump, just stay home. It's ridiculous. Maybe that person really, wanted to vote, but they're convinced if they live in, say, a bright red state like Alabama, I don't have to vote because it's going for Trump. And if they're for Hillary Clinton and they live in a reliably blue state, they go, well, you know what? I'm not interested. Why should I bother? My state's blue. What's the difference? So you get a 58% voter turnout. It's ridiculous altogether. Political science experts agree that too many Americans feel their vote doesn't count. It just doesn't count. Listen to Doug McAdam, professor of sociology at Stanford University, who asked, quote, "What about all those citizens who reside in non-competitive states?" He makes my point. Consider the loyal Republican who lives in California. He's told, what's the difference? Hillary's going to win by so much. Don't worry about it. But if we were using the popular vote, believe me, every Republican in California would get out, and every Democrat would get out, and every independent would get out, because their vote would count. Every 4 years, a lot of people in different states feel that their vote doesn't matter. They feel powerless when it comes to the presidential race, the only race in the country where the winner doesn't win, maybe. The winner doesn't win. It's crazy. I looked all over to find out another example where this is true. It's not true. Northeastern University, William Crotty, professor emeritus of political science, who said, quote, "The Electoral College has never worked well. The fact is, it's a terrible system, has no place in an age where democracy is ascendant. It continues to exist from sheer inertia and the protection of entrenched power. It has little to do with democracy." Well, everybody knows I didn't run for the Senate. I have a fabulous replacement coming. But I did drop this bill on the Electoral College to do away with it because I'm still a senator, I'm here, and I'll be darned if I'm going to let this thing pass. Listen to a professor of law at Fordham University, John Feerick, quote, "Not only have reasons for the Electoral College long since vanished, but the institution has not fulfilled the design of the framers. Today it represents little more than an archaic and undemocratic counting device. There's no reason for retaining such a formula of electing the President of the United States." Well, I also saw a poll that shows 62% of the people in this country, regardless of party, think we should do away with it and go to a system where the winner wins. How unique. The winner wins, and the loser loses. That's the way it should be in the greatest democracy in the country. Try explaining this to your kids and grandkids, I'm telling you, if they're about 11 or 12. Explain what happens. I know changing the system won't be easy. I've been around a long time. I've spent more than half of my life in politics and elected life. So we understand that the legislation would need to be enacted by Congress and would only take effect after being ratified by 3/4 of the states within 7 years after its passage. This is very difficult. This is a constitutional amendment, so I'm not naive, and I understand what we're talking about. But there is another way to address this. It's called the National Popular Vote Plan, which would guarantee that the presidential candidate who wins the most votes would win the election and be the president, whether it's Donald Trump getting the most votes or Hillary Clinton getting the most votes, etc. All it requires is for enough states to act. It's an interstate compact where the states would agree to award their electoral votes to the presidential candidate who wins the popular vote. So that if in California, where we have a number of electoral votes, if Donald Trump wins, they go to Donald Trump, regardless of how our state voted. In other words, the votes are counted, and then the states give their electoral votes to the winner of the popular vote. Pretty simple. So you still have the Electoral College, but the result is the votes are given to the person who wins the national popular vote. The agreement takes effect only when the participating states together hold a majority of electoral votes. That is 270 out of 538. Now, so far, the National Popular Vote Bill has been enacted into law by 10 states and the District of Columbia, adding up to 165 electoral votes. And the legislation's been introduced in every state of the country. And it has support on both sides of the aisle, because electing the person who wins is the democratic way. Trump's supporter Newt Gingrich wrote a letter in 2014 endorsing the idea. He wrote, quote, "No one should become president of the United States without speaking to the needs and hopes of Americans in all 50 states. America would be better served with a presidential election process that treated citizens across the country equally." And former Republican Congressman Bob Barr said, quote, "Only when the election process is given back to all of the people of all the states will we be able to choose a president based on what's best for all 50 states and not just a select few." Now, I want to make a point here. I don't agree with Newt Gingrich on pretty much anything except this. This is rare. I mean, Newt Gingrich says Medicare should wither on the vine. He called Democrats traitors. I mean, believe me, I served with him. I know. And his ethical standards don't meet what I think the standard should be. But set it aside. Here we are on the same side. No one should become president of the United States without speaking to the needs and hopes of Americans in all 50 states. America would be better served with a presidential election process that treats citizens across the country equally. So I urge my colleagues to take a close look at the legislation I've introduced, and I urge state legislators and governors around the country to take a close look at the National Popular Vote Bill. Again, I'm going to be honest with you. It is really hard to pass a constitutional amendment. I'm not naive about it. But to pass a law in various states isn't that hard. That should be done. And the American people can help. I would ask them to call their senators and members of Congress about our bill. There's one in the House by Charlie Rangel to do away with the Electoral College, very simple, and just let the popular vote stand. Ask them to sign on to this bill, but don't stop there. Write and call your representatives in the State House and push for your state to sign on to the Interstate Compact. You know, a lot of people come up to me after this election and said, you know, I don't feel my voice is heard, period. And this is one of the reasons. Well, make your voice heard on either getting rid of the Electoral College or the State Compact, where a state would give its votes to the winner of the national popular vote. Voting's the cornerstone of democracy. We've had men and women through the decades die for that right to vote. Generations of Americans of every gender, race, religion, and ideology have marched and struggled and died to secure this fundamental freedom, and yet we have a system where the winner can lose. Where the winner can lose. We owe it to the American people, who have given so much for the right to vote, to make sure that every vote matters and every vote counts. We owe it to them to ensure that the vote of a citizen in my state is worth the same as a vote of someone in a swing state. We owe it to every Republican voter and every Democratic voter and every independent voter, every Green Party voter, whatever the party, to have that vote count, to have that vote count. One person, one vote. That's the cornerstone of democracy. So by making this critical change, where the winner of the popular vote wins and every citizen's vote counts regardless of who they are, where they live, whether they're a Republican, Democrat, or a declined to state, or a Green, or whatever the party they choose. We will then be engaging voters in every single state. We will lift voter turnout. We will ensure that every presidential candidate speaks to the needs of Americans in every state and every region. We will ensure equal representation for all. You know, sometimes I come down here and I talk about issues that are very controversial. I must tell you, if you ask anyone on the street, do you think the winner of the popular vote should win the presidency? I say a very strong majority would say, of course. And if you say to them, do you know of any office in the land, whether it's governor, mayor, supervisor, city council, sewer board, sanitation district, you name it, where the winner doesn't win? They'll say, no, I can't think of any. You know what? There are none. So why not do the simple thing and the right thing and the just thing and make sure that the winner of the popular vote is sworn in as our president? And I think this will be a huge boon for every single voter in this greatest of all countries. And with that, I would yield the floor.